You know that specific sound a pair of $800 Italian leather dress shoes makes on polished concrete? It's not just a click. It's a declaration of war. It's a sharp, rhythmic tap, tap, tap that says, I've never worried about a mortgage payment in my life, and I'm about to mess with yours. I'm Brady Martinez, 49 years old, and I was standing near the back of the main atrium at Nexus Dynamics, holding a lukewarm cup of break room coffee that tasted like motor oil and disappointment. I'd been the director of operations in real estate for 21 years. That means I knew exactly how much that polished concrete floor cost per square foot, 20 tiles and 50 sounds installed. I knew the HVAC load required to keep this glass atrium from turning into a greenhouse in Austin heat, and I knew that the lease on the coffee machine was expiring in 2 weeks. But apparently, I was obsolete. Shane Rodriguez, the founder's son, swept into the room like a tornado in a $3,000 tech bro uniform. He had that specific glow that only comes from organic juice cleanses and zero real-world consequences. He was 29, had an MBA he probably bought from Stanford, and had just been appointed CEO after his father, Lance Rodriguez, decided to retire to a ranch in Montana to find his authentic self and avoid quarterly earnings calls. "Good morning, team," Shane chirped. His voice had that manic positivity that makes grown men break out in hives. He didn't use a microphone. He projected like he was addressing a stadium. "Today marks a new era, Nexus 2.0. We're trimming the fat. We're pivoting. We're disrupting our own legacy." I took a slow sip of my terrible coffee. Trimming the fat is corporate speak for firing anyone who remembers when the servers actually worked. Shane scanned the room with laser focus. His eyes weren't looking for people. They were looking for targets. When his gaze landed on me, he didn't blink. He smiled that shark grin that showed too many teeth. "Brady," he said. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the vending machines in the hallway. "Step forward, please." I didn't move immediately. I adjusted my glasses, smoothed the front of my navy polo shirt, bought at Costco on sale 3 years ago. Practical, durable, invisible. I walked to the front of the room in my work boots, making no noise compared to his designer shoes. "Everyone," Shane gestured to me like I was a museum exhibit of an extinct species. "This is what I'm talking about. The old guard, the stagnant bureaucracy. Brady here has been managing our facilities since before TikTok existed, and frankly, we don't need managers anymore. We need visionaries. We need agility." He turned to me, dropping the smile. "Brady, consider this your notice, effective immediately. We're outsourcing operations and facilities to a cloud-based firm in Silicon Valley. They're cheaper, faster, and frankly, more innovative." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw Sarah Miller, the company's general counsel, standing to Shane's right. Sarah was a good lawyer, but she looked nervous. She knew this was a potential age discrimination lawsuit wrapped in a wrongful termination bow, but she was too scared of the new vision to speak up. "You want me to leave now?" I asked. My voice was steady. "I don't yell. I solve problems." "Right now," Shane said, checking his Apple Watch, "security will escort you. Leave your laptop. And please don't make a scene. It's so analog." I nodded slowly, calmly. I didn't get angry. I didn't beg. I didn't shout about my 21 years of loyalty or the time I came in at 2 a.m. because a water main burst in the server room and I was the only one with the emergency contractor's number. I simply reached into my Canvas messenger bag. "Very well," I said. "If I'm no longer the director of operations, I suppose I shouldn't be holding on to these." I pulled out a heavy brass ring. It wasn't a digital key card. It was a physical, old-school key ring with about 20 master keys on it. Keys that looked like they belonged in a maximum security facility. I placed them gently on the sleek glass podium in front of Shane. Clink. "The master set," I said quietly. "Campus access, warehouse, perimeter, server rooms and executive suite override." Shane rolled his eyes. "Cute. We use key cards, Brady. Keep your antiques as a souvenir." But Sarah Miller finally looked up from her shoes. Her eyes locked onto that brass ring. Specifically, she was looking at the small red tag attached to the largest key. The color drained from her face like she'd been hit with cold water. "Shane," Sarah whispered. It was a strangled sound. "Shane, those aren't just facility keys." "Quiet, Sarah," Shane snapped. He waved at security. "Get him out of here." 2 guards, guys I'd hired myself, guys whose kids' names I knew, stepped forward looking apologetic. "Sorry, Mr. Martinez," one mumbled. "It's fine, Jason," I said. "You're just doing your job." I turned back to Shane one last time. He was already looking at his phone, bored with his own power play. He had no idea what he'd just done. He thought he was throwing out the trash. He didn't realize he was throwing out the load-bearing wall of the entire operation. "Good luck with the cloud-based management," I said. "I hear the reception is terrible in the basement." I walked out without looking back. But as the glass doors slid shut behind me, I saw Sarah frantically grabbing the keyring, her hands shaking as she brought it close to her face to read the tag. I knew what it said. I wrote it there myself 13 years ago. Property of Lone Star Holdings, LLC. Owner use only. Shane had wanted a show. He wanted to prove he was the boss. Well, he certainly proved something. He proved that you should never fire the person who holds the keys until you know exactly whose locks they open. And he was about to find out that Nexus Dynamics didn't actually own the ground he was standing on. I did. To understand why Sarah the lawyer looked like she was about to lose her lunch, you have to understand the history of Nexus Dynamics. Or rather, you have to understand Lance Rodriguez's relationship with paperwork, which was about as healthy as a smoker's relationship with his lungs. 21 years ago when I started, the company was just a chaotic startup in a leased warehouse. Lance was a genius engineer and a terrible businessman. He treated tax law like a suggestion and viewed paperwork as a personal insult. He wanted to build cybersecurity solutions and buy vintage motorcycles. He did not want to deal with property taxes, zoning permits, or liability insurance. I was fresh out of the Navy then, 28 years old with an engineering background and a healthy respect for proper documentation. The military teaches you that paperwork saves lives and careers. Lance hired me as a facilities manager because I was the only guy who showed up to the interview with a 3-ring binder full of questions about the building's infrastructure. About 8 years into my tenure, Nexus exploded. We were drowning in government contracts and needed to expand fast. Lance wanted to buy a massive campus in Austin, 4 buildings, a data center, and a secure testing facility. It was a $35 million acquisition, which was serious money back then. But Lance had a problem. He was personally leveraged because of a messy divorce. Shane's mom had taken the lake house and half the stock options. Lance kept the debt, and the company's credit rating was shaky because he kept missing quarterly filings. The man could build encryption algorithms that would make the NSA weep, but he couldn't remember to file a Form 10-K. Banks weren't exactly lining up to lend Nexus the full amount for the real estate. I was sitting in the conference room, the old one that smelled like stale donuts and broken dreams, watching Lance have what could only be described as a controlled meltdown. He was throwing stress balls at a whiteboard because the bank wanted a bigger down payment than he could scrape together. "I don't have time for this," Lance shouted, his hair looking like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "I need that facility. We have classified equipment sitting in a rented garage that floods every time it drizzles. Brady, fix it." "Fix the bank's lending criteria?" I asked, looking up from my notepad where I'd been calculating square footage costs. "Fix the ownership structure," he said, spinning around to face me. "I don't care who owns it, I just need to use it. Set up a shell company, set up a trust, set up a lemonade stand, I don't care. Just get the deed signed so I can move the equipment in before the next thunderstorm." That was the moment, the golden opportunity that would change everything. See, Lance didn't care about assets. He was an engineer's engineer. He cared about function, not form. He viewed real estate as a necessary evil, something you had to maintain, insure, and pay taxes on. He wanted the utility of the building without the headache of ownership. So I proposed a solution, a strategic, holding entity that would handle all the boring real estate stuff while he focused on the fun engineering problems. "What if," I said, pulling out a legal pad, "we create an LLC specifically to hold the property? This entity purchases the land, assumes all the liability, and leases it back to Nexus on a triple net basis. That keeps the mortgage off your balance sheet, improves your debt-to-equity ratio for future investors, and gives you operational control without ownership hassles." Lance's eyes lit up. "You can do that?" "It's perfectly legal. Companies do it all the time for tax and liability purposes. How long would it take?" 2 weeks to set up the LLC, another month to structure the purchase." Lance didn't even pause. "Do it. Whatever paperwork needs signing, just put it in front of me. I trust you to handle the details." And that, right there, was Lance Rodriguez in a nutshell. Brilliant man, but he treated legal documents like software licenses, something you scroll through quickly and click, "I agree," without reading. I spent the next 2 weeks creating Lone Star Holdings, LLC. The name was deliberately boring. It sounded like every other generic Texas business entity. I filed the paperwork, established the bank accounts, and prepared all the purchase documents. Here's the detail that would eventually change everything. When I created Lone Star Holdings, I made myself the sole member. Not Nexus Dynamics, not Lance Rodriguez. Me. Was this legal? Absolutely. Was it disclosed? You bet. It was right there on page 38 of the purchase agreement that Lance signed. Lone Star Holdings, LLC, a Texas limited liability company. Sole member, Brady Martinez. The beautiful thing about disclosure is that it only works if someone actually reads what they're signing. Lance signed that document while eating a breakfast burrito and talking on the phone with a supplier about server racks. He saw improved debt ratio and operational control maintained, and his brain shut off. I put up my own savings for the down payment, about $200,000 from my Navy pension, and some smart investments I'd made over the years. The bank approved the loan because Nexus signed a 15-year lease agreement that guaranteed the mortgage payments, plus a healthy profit margin. Essentially, Nexus Dynamics was paying my mortgage while I built equity in prime Austin real estate. For 15 years, I played the part of the dutiful employee. I managed the buildings, fixed the equipment, negotiated contracts with vendors, and every month, like clockwork, Nexus wired $180,000 to Lone Star Holdings. And every month, Lone Star Holdings paid the mortgage and deposited the rest into a very healthy bank account. I never flaunted it. I drove my Ford F-150, brought lunch in a cooler, wore polo shirts and work boots. I let everyone treat me like the maintenance guy, the guy you call when something breaks or when you need someone to coordinate with the cleaning crew. I became the landlord they forgot they had. The genius of it was the infrastructure clause I'd buried in the lease agreement. Any permanent improvements made to the property, the fiber optic cables, the backup generators, the advanced cooling systems, the security infrastructure, became property of the landlord upon installation. Nexus paid for all the upgrades, but I owned them. By the time Shane showed up with his Italian shoes and his Nexus 2.0 vision, Lone Star Holdings owned not just the buildings, but the entire nervous system that kept the company running. So when Shane fired me, he didn't just terminate an employee. He fired the guy who controlled the off switch for the entire operation, and I was about to show him exactly what that meant. 3 days before Shane officially took over, I knew the storm was coming. The rumors had been circulating around the water cooler for months. The sun is ascending. The purge is coming. Update your resumes. As a professional who actually gave a damn about business continuity, I did what any responsible facilities manager would do. I prepared a comprehensive transition document. 45 pages of critical information about leases, vendor relationships, infrastructure dependencies, and compliance requirements. It was detailed, thorough, and formatted in Times New Roman size 12 because I'm not a monster. It was also the most important document in Nexus Dynamics corporate history. I emailed it to Shane with the subject line, Critical Infrastructure Leases, Property Holdings, and Compliance Review for FY25. I copied his new chief of staff, Ashley Brown, a 24-year-old whose LinkedIn profile listed brand optimization and synergy cultivation as core competencies. I tracked the email. Ashley opened it 12 seconds after I sent it. She spent exactly 6 seconds looking at it before forwarding it to a folder labeled Legacy Docs, Boring Stuff. 6 seconds. To review 15 years of institutional knowledge. If they had bothered to read page 4, paragraph 3, they would have found this sentence. Please note that 90% of operational square footage is leased from third-party entity Lone Star Holdings, LLC. The master lease agreement is contingent upon continued employment of the designated asset manager, Brady Martinez, to maintain tenant good standing status. Failure to retain said manager triggers immediate renegotiation clause under Section 12B. They didn't read it. Of course they didn't. 2 days after my dramatic exit, I was at home in Cedar Park, working on my truck in the garage. My house sits on 2 acres of native Texas landscape, live oaks, bluebonnets, and drought-resistant plants that don't require constant babying. The mortgage was paid off years ago thanks to my monthly rent checks from Nexus. I was changing the oil filter when my phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and glanced at the screen. Notifications from the Nexus internal system were lighting up my lock screen. They hadn't cut off my email access yet. Amateurs. Urgent. Access denied server room C. Urgent. Power failure. Executive wing. Urgent. Security badge. System offline. Urgent. HVAC. System unresponsive. I smiled and took a sip of my beer. See, the smart building system that Shane was so proud of, the one that controlled access, lighting, climate, and security, was registered to the building owner, which was me. The monthly service fee was automatically charged to my corporate credit card, the same card Nexus had canceled 30 minutes after escorting me out. When they canceled that card, the auto pay for the building management system bounced, and the vendor, a company called Secure Tech Solutions, had a very strict policy. Payment failure equals immediate service suspension. No warnings, no grace period, no customer service calls, just a big red switch that gets flipped to off. Back at the office, chaos was erupting in real time. I could picture it perfectly. Shane trying to badge into his corner office, only to get a sad red denial light. Ashley attempting to access the server room to optimize the digital ecosystem, finding herself locked out by magnetic seals that wouldn't budge. And the air conditioning. Oh, the beautiful, expensive air conditioning system. When Secure Tech cut the service, the building defaulted to energy conservation mode. That meant the AC shut down, the automated blinds retracted to let in maximum Texas sunshine, and the indoor temperature began its inexorable climb toward a toasty 88 degrees. In August, in Austin. I finished my oil change and walked into my kitchen, cracking open my laptop, my personal MacBook, not the corporate Dell they'd confiscated. I logged into the Lone Star Holdings management portal and found a new message waiting. From Sarah Miller, General Counsel. Subject, urgent, key access issue. Time, 2:47 p.m. Brady, we need to speak immediately. There appears to be some confusion regarding building access. The keys you left don't seem to work on the manual override systems. Also, our bank is asking questions about a change of control provision in some lease document. Please call me as soon as possible. I closed the laptop and made myself a sandwich. Turkey, Swiss, mustard on sourdough. I had all the time in the world. Meanwhile, Shane was discovering that his inheritance came with some unexpected strings attached. He'd called an emergency meeting with Jeffrey Walsh from Southwest Commercial Bank to discuss a bridge loan for innovation initiatives. Translation: he wanted $10 million to rebrand everything, fire more legacy personnel, and hire influencers to explain why cybersecurity was basically like cryptocurrency, but for data. His plan was simple. Use the Nexus campus as collateral. Prime Austin real estate, worth at least $35 million on today's market. Should be easy money for a visionary like himself. So, Mr. Rodriguez, Jeffrey said, consulting his tablet in the sweltering conference room, you want to leverage the headquarters at 2400 Tech Ridge Drive as collateral for this loan. Exactly, Shane replied, fanning himself with a quarterly report. It's our flagship asset, represents our stability and growth trajectory. Jeffrey frowned at his screen, tapped it, frowned some more. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm seeing a discrepancy in our title search. What kind of discrepancy? Shane's voice had an edge to it. Well, according to county records, Nexus Dynamics doesn't actually own this property. Shane laughed, that sharp, disbelieving bark that rich kids make when reality doesn't match their expectations. That's ridiculous. My father built this place. I have ribbon-cutting photos. He may have cut the ribbon, Jeffrey said carefully, but the deed is held by an entity called Lone Star Holdings, LLC, and there's a no-encumbrance clause that prevents you from using this property as loan collateral, since you're technically just the tenant. The silence that followed was probably visible from space. Who, Shane asked slowly, is Lone Star Holdings? Jeffrey consulted his file. The managing member is listed as Brady Martinez. If I could have seen Shane's face at that moment, I probably would have laughed until I cried. The dawning realization that the obsolete maintenance guy he'd just fired was actually his landlord must have hit him like a freight train carrying a load of irony. Brady, Shane whispered. The facilities guy? Apparently so, Jeffrey said, closing his briefcase. I'm afraid this loan application is denied. You can't pledge assets you don't own. Furthermore, looking at your lease agreement, it appears you're subject to a renegotiation clause triggered by management changes. You might want to contact Mr. Martinez about renewal terms. Shane sat there in his $3,000 outfit, sweating in his own conference room, finally understanding that he'd just fired the one person who could literally turn off the lights. And I was just getting started. I decided it was time to make things official. Not a phone call, not an email. I drafted a formal notice on Lone Star Holdings letterhead and had it hand-delivered by courier. 2. Nexus Dynamics Executive Team. From Lone Star Holdings LLC, RE, Notice of Lease Violation and Compliance Audit. Dear Tenant, it has come to our attention that the designated liaison, B. Martinez, is no longer employed by your firm. Per Section 12B of the Master Lease, this triggers an immediate compliance review. Please be advised that all building modifications made without owner approval must be reversed immediately. This includes unauthorized collaboration pods in the lobby, fire code violation, and the meditation garden installation, zoning violation. Additionally, pursuant to the gross negligence clause, current month rent is subject to a 15% penalty fee. Please remit payment of $27,000 immediately. Site inspection scheduled for Monday, 9 a.m. Master keys required. Sincerely, management. Shane's response was predictable. First came the panicked voicemails, then the desperate text messages, then the threats of lawsuits. I ignored them all. If the landlord wanted to communicate with his tenant, they could follow proper channels. Certified mail only, 5 to 7 business days response time. The real fun started when Shane hired a director of physical operations named Corey Davis to replace me. Corey lasted 36 hours before I had him fired through a combination of HVAC sabotage and strategic code enforcement calls. The city inspector who showed up Monday morning took one look at Shane's unauthorized lobby modifications and slapped a bright red condemnation notice on the front entrance. Building closed until compliance, Inspector Kevin Taylor announced. Fine is $2,500 per day payable to the property owner. That's when the board of directors finally got involved. Saturday morning, a black Tesla pulled into my driveway. Jennifer Wilson, chairwoman of Nexus's board, walked up to my front porch where I was enjoying my coffee and the morning bird songs. "Brady," she said, nodding respectfully. "Jennifer, nice day for a drive. You've made your point. Shane is inexperienced. He made a serious mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to file a quarterly report, Jennifer. Firing the guy who owns your building is corporate suicide." She smiled grimly. "Agreed. The board is meeting Monday. Emergency session. We want you there." "I don't work for Nexus anymore." "We know. We want you there as the landlord. We need to discuss terms of surrender." Monday morning, I walked into the Nexus boardroom, a room I'd maintained for 21 years but never sat in as an equal. Today, I took the chair at the head of the table. When I walked in wearing my best dress shirt and blazer, nobody challenged me. Shane was there, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His designer clothes were wrinkled, his confidence shattered. The board members, 9 successful executives who controlled billions in government contracts, were all studying me with obvious respect. "Thank you for joining us, Mr. Martinez," Jennifer said. "Brady is fine, or you can call me landlord." Aaron Brown, a hedge fund representative, cut straight to business. "This situation is unsustainable. What do you want?" I slid a folder across the polished table. "I'm enforcing a contract that Nexus violated. You fired the required liaison. Simple breach of lease terms." "We can fight this," Shane said weakly. Sarah Miller, looking exhausted, spoke up. "Shane, I've reviewed everything again." Page 38. It was disclosed, signed, and board ratified. "We have no legal case. If we go to court, he evicts us during proceedings. We'd be bankrupt within 60 days. "So, what do you want?" Jennifer asked directly. I leaned back. "I don't want my job back. I want partnership. Lone Star Holdings will forgive all violations and restore original rent rates. We'll reactivate building systems and handle compliance issues. In exchange, I want 8% equity in Nexus Dynamics and a board seat." "8%?" Shane shouted. "That's millions. It's cheaper than relocation," I said calmly, "and cheaper than bankruptcy. Your infrastructure is hardwired into my property. You can't move without starting completely over." I stood up. "One more condition. I need management I can work with. People who read emails and understand that infrastructure matters as much as innovation. Shane's face went white. He looked at Jennifer, who was carefully examining her hands. "You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow," I said, picking up my folder. "Otherwise, eviction proceedings begin Wednesday. I've already had conversations with a competitor very interested in a turnkey facility." I walked to the door. "Oh, Shane, if you need boxes for your personal items, I have plenty, but you'll need someone with keys to access storage." 4:30 p.m. The next day, Jennifer called. "It's done. The board voted unanimously. We accept your terms." Shane submitted his resignation effective immediately. "Stock transfer papers are being drafted." "Excellent. I'll reactivate building systems within the hour." "Welcome to the board, Brady. First meeting Thursday at 9 a.m. Wednesday morning, I drove to campus in my F-150 and parked in Shane's old reserved spot. I walked through the lobby. Collaboration pods gone, proper seating restored, air conditioning humming efficiently. At the elevator, the doors opened and Shane walked out carrying a single cardboard box. We stood there for a moment, the entitled air and the man he'd underestimated. "You planned this from the beginning," Shane said, his voice hollow. "I didn't plan anything, Shane. I just built a safety net. You chose to cut the rope. I still have shares. Your father texted me congratulations this morning. Turns out he prefers dividends over drama." Shane tried one last time. "You're just a maintenance guy with good paperwork. You're not a visionary." I smiled. "Shane, visionaries come and go. They burn bright, pivot fast, disrupt everything. But the guy who owns the ground? He stays. Boring pays the bills. Boring keeps the servers running. Boring built this place while you were getting your MBA. I pulled out my new key card, matte black with gold lettering, Brady Martinez, board member. Security will escort you out. Try not to make a scene. It's so analog." Shane walked away, his Italian shoes clicking a defeated rhythm on the concrete. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my first board meeting as an equity partner, watching our new interim CEO, a competent woman named Lisa Garcia who actually reads her emails. Present quarterly numbers. Revenue is up 15% since Shane left. Funny how things improve when you stop disrupting everything that works. Shane? Last I heard, he's at some AI startup in San Francisco, probably learning that daddy's money can't buy competence. As for me, I'm exactly where I belong, making sure the foundation stays solid while the company grows. Because that's what we do. We build things that last. We read the fine print. We remember everything. And sometimes when someone mistakes quiet competence for weakness, we remind them who really holds the keys.